Hello and welcome to part 3 in a series of videos that I'm putting out this week where I break down all the fights taking place this weekend at UFC on ESPN Plus 10 from a betting perspective. Now in today's video I will be covering 4 fights, and I've already covered 6 fights on this card which you can find in parts 1 and 2. I will leave a link to both those videos in the description below. And in today's video I will be going through some of the more competitive fights on this card, because like I've said, this is a very different type of UFC card to what we're used to. If we just have a quick scan through, we can see that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 out of the 13 fights this weekend feature very heavy favourites, and I guess you could even throw Antonio Carlos Jr. into that mix as well, although his odds have been improving all week. So a different kind of event for betting really. With so many heavy favourites, you've either got to find a few, 2 or 3 heavy favourites that you trust enough to put into a 2 or 3 leg parlay accumulator, or you've got to find an underdog with a legitimate path to victory if you can't find any opportunities in the competitive fights like Megan Anderson against Felicia Spencer, Kevin Lee against Rafael Dos Anjos. But this is a very tough event for betting. But if you guys want to see me do a live stream this week where I dig through all these fights and try and find a decent value prop bet for you, then please hit the like button below. And if all 4 parts of the videos that I'm putting out this week get 250 likes each, I will be putting out this live stream on Friday night. So if we look at the betting schedule this weekend, Saturday is going to be a busy day, especially if you live bet on MMA, because from 6 PM UK time we've got KSW 49, and that runs right through until about 4 or 5 AM UK time, with UFC on ESPN Plus 10 starting at 10 PM. This says Plus 9 because it was originally called Plus 9 before the UFC changed the name of all their UFC on ESPN Plus events. So now that we've got the boring stuff out the way, hit the like button below. Also please hit subscribe. I really want to get to 1,400 subs in time for this event, and you right there sat there can help me do it. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit the subscribe button. It would mean a lot. And now let's jump into the first fight that I want to talk about in today's video, which is Davy Ramos against Austin Hubbard. And right from the jump, it is important to mention that Davy Ramos is one of the biggest favourites on the card. He is currently around about a 1.21 favourite, which means that if we look at the current implied probability on his odds, average odds of 1.21, which is minus 476, give him an implied probability of 83%, which means to get any value at all on a bet on Davy Ramos, you've got to give him close to a 90% chance of winning, which is very difficult in an MMA fight, because like I always say, fighters fight with injuries all the time. Fighters just show up and significantly underperform. Of course, we saw it last weekend with Jose Aldo. Fighters suffer with nerves and stress and anxiety. Just on last week's card on UFC 237, Irene Aldana spoke in the post-fight interview about how she was so nervous for the fight and she felt that affected her performance. And even Rose Namajunas, when she was beaten by Jessica Andrade, said that, she just felt relieved to not have the pressure carrying the belt anymore. So we know the confidence and anxiety and pressure really can weigh on a fighter's performance, which always makes it difficult to cap someone at 90%. But if both guys do show up and perform to their full potential, Austin Hubbard has definitely got a tough job on his hands. Hubbard is the guy here in the American shorts with the blue tape on his gloves. And I'll just leave this fight running in the background while I give you my thoughts on this matchup. So, as you'll see in this clip, when it comes to striking, Hubbard isn't really anything special. I mean, he fights out of the southpaw stance, or he was fighting out of the southpaw stance, but he can switch back and forth. But you see him fight out of the southpaw stance quite a lot, which, is something. But in terms of overall technique, not really that special. There we can see him switch back to southpaw, and he doesn't really carry that much power in his strikes either. If we look back through his record, you can see that he is a bit of a decision machine, with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of his last 7 fights go into a decision, and he just doesn't really have that much power in his hands, so standing up shouldn't pose that much of a threat to Davy Ramos. Now, we know that Davy Ramos is a very strong grappler. His base is in judo, but he's also got strong offensive wrestling and very, very high level Brazilian jiu-jitsu once he gets to the ground. And when he gets his opponents to the ground, he's devastating. He's a very high level grappler, and that is bad news for Austin Hubbard, because he is just not a very good grappler at all. He's got bad takedown defense, and on the ground there were just levels to ground games, and Davy Ramos is several levels above Austin Hubbard. Now, I can't actually show you his takedown defense in this video, or this video will be flagged for copyright, but the fight between Hubbard and Motta, and also Hubbard and Park, they're both available online. If you go check them out, you'll be able to see his takedown defense tested in those fights, and you can see that Ramos shouldn't have too many problems taking this fight to the ground. But my problem with Ramos, and the reason why I don't recommend betting him at these odds, is even though he should be able to win easily, even though he should take Hubbard down and dominate him on the ground, Ramos is one of those guys that does tend to slow down as the fight progresses, and he isn't very good at all in the second and third round once he gets tired. If you can make him work really hard for takedowns, he tends to get tired. Davy Ramos is the exact kind of guy that you can turn into a panic wrestler. Now, I don't expect Hubbard to be able to keep this fight standing, but it is worth noting that Davy Ramos is only 5'8". He's a relatively small lightweight, and Hubbard is, just check this fight is at lightweight, it is, and Hubbard is a bit bigger at 5'10". Got a bit of a size advantage on him, which may make it harder for Ramos to take him down and hold him down. Probably won't. It's only a small size difference. But Ramos is one of these smaller, compact guys that when they get tired, you can turn them into a panic wrestler. So at these odds, it's an easy pass for me. I can't bet a guy like Ramos as a big favourite when we know if you drag him into the second and third round, he starts to get very tired. But at the same time, Hubbard isn't particularly dangerous standing, doesn't really have very good takedown defense, and he's a low level on the ground, so Ramos should be able to win easily. And as you can see, as this video has been playing in the background here, just Hubbard looks very, very ordinary, nothing special. So this should be an easy win for Davy Ramos. Now let's move on to the next fight, which is going to be Aspen Ladd against Sahara Eubanks. So Aspen Ladd and Sahara Eubanks fought back in 2017 in Invicta FC, which is coming up to be around about 18 months ago now. And Aspen Ladd won the fight by unanimous decision, but if you have UFC Fight Pass and you go back and watch this matchup, you'll see that it was actually a pretty competitive fight. A very, very competitive fight, actually, which is why it is kind of surprising to see Aspen Ladd as such a big favourite. She is currently around about an average of 1.33, which is minus 303 for an implied probability of 75%. So to give any value to a bet on Aspen Ladd here, you'd have to cap her at around about 80%, which I think is totally crazy. If you go back and watch their first fight, like I say, in Invicta, it was relatively competitive, certainly competitive enough for Aspen Ladd to command an implied probability of 75%. Kind of silly. But one of the reasons why Aspen Ladd is a big favourite is because I think that Sahara Eubanks has had a bit of a rough run in the UFC so far. She's built up a bit of a bad reputation for pulling out of fights. Here we can see that Eubanks had to rebook a fight against Jessica Ai, and she also had to, I thought she pulled out of the fight against Valentina Shevchenko, but it must have been the fight against Nico Montano she pulled out of. Yes, it was. So Eubanks has had a lot of issues with cutting weight. She struggles to make the 125-pound flyweight limit, and we saw her really badly struggle to make the weight when she competed on The Ultimate Fighter. And she fought Aspen Ladd back at bantamweight in 2017, which is obviously a much better weight class for her since she has so many problems trying to make the flyweight limit. But it is confusing as to why she struggles to make flyweight, because she is relatively small at 5'3". To put this into perspective for you, Irene Aldana is a bantamweight that fought last week, and she's 5'9". So Eubanks at 5'3". I mean, really, we see fighters with this sort of wingspan with 5'3" with a 67-inch reach fight in the strawweight division. So perhaps it's just more of an issue with Eubanks' diet and discipline. You know, she should be fighting at flyweight. She shouldn't really have any problems making the weight, but clearly she does. So she's making the smart decision to go and fight at bantamweight instead of continuing to put her body through these brutal weight cuts. And that's significant because one of Aspen Ladd's main strengths is her output. So if this fight stays standing, there's no doubt that Sijara Eubanks has got a technical advantage. She's a more technical striker. But Aspen Ladd is just like the ocean. She just keeps coming wave after wave after wave after wave. She's got a very high output. She never stops throwing strikes. She's always in your face. She's constantly coming forward and walking you down, which is exhausting. And she's very tough. She's tough enough to walk through your shots and still keep coming. She is just relentless. Think of Justin Gaethje's fighting style. She's kind of like that, except she doesn't slow down and she's not as reckless. She doesn't wing hooks as much. But she does just come forward with relentless pressure, which is difficult to deal with, especially in the women's division when not many female fighters possess the power in their hands to back their opponents up. And unlike fighters like Caitlin Chookagian or an Irene Aldana or a Holly Holm, Eubanks doesn't have the footwork to circle on the outside and counter-strike either. So Aspen Ladd's forward pressure should cause Sijara Eubanks big problems, and it did cause her big problems when they last fought in Invicta back in 2017. But it is worth noting that that was only Eubanks' fourth pro fight, and since then she's completed an entire season on The Ultimate Fighter and had 2 fights in the UFC. And also she's now training under Mark Henry. Back then she was training, I believe she was training with the same guy who trains Sadiq Youssef, and his name has escaped me. His name has escaped me, and I'm going to have to Google it or it's going to hurt my brain. It is on the tip of my tongue. His name I've just completely forgot. It is there. Irwin. Yeah, Team Lloyd Irvin. Can't believe I forgot that. Sorry to Lloyd Irvin. I was massively disrespectful. My mind just went completely blank. So yeah, training with Lloyd Irvin before, and now she is training with Mark Henry. So who knows how much Eubanks has improved since she fought Aspen Ladd back in 2017. She certainly looked good against Laura Murphy, although did make a few mistakes against Modafferi. So, in terms of technique, this fight is a fight where Sijara Eubanks is more technical everywhere. She's a more technical striker. On the ground, she's a very high level in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Much higher level than Aspen Ladd, but Aspen Ladd is just scrappy, and she's just got cardio for days, high output, aggressive, works very hard, and what she lacks in technique, she more than makes up for in work rate, and it is going to be really difficult for Eubanks to keep up with the pace that Aspen Ladd sets. But having said that, on the ground, Eubanks is a very high level in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Aspen Ladd is still green. She's still only 24 years old. She's still learning, so she does make some mistakes on the ground. And if Sijara Eubanks can make her pay for those, establish dominant positions, run the clock down, and win 2 out of 3 rounds, she's gonna be able to nick a decision here. So this is one of those fights where I don't want to bet Eubanks personally, because she's already lost to Aspen Ladd, and clearly she has some weight cutting, perhaps discipline issues. She does tend to slow down as the fight progresses, and with Aspen Ladd being the kind of fighter that fights at a relentless pace, it is more likely that she wins. I just feel that over 3 rounds, she's going to outwork Eubanks. But Eubanks definitely has the skills to make this a competitive fight. So what I would say is, I don't think I've made myself clear enough in my past videos about my personal betting position on fights, because for some reason loads of people bet Anderson Silva last weekend based on my advice, even though I thought I explicitly said I was not betting Anderson Silva. So let me make this very clear to you. If you are one of these people that just bets for fun and you just want to bet for some entertainment, and you want to just place some bets to make watching the fights more interesting, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You know, gambling's a form of entertainment. That's how I started out like 10 years ago, betting £5 on every single UFC fight on a card, and then, you know, just to make the fights more interesting, having someone to root for. If you want to place bets on this card, I don't think Sahara Eubanks is a bad bet at the current odds. If we look at her odds at the moment, they are currently around about an average of, call it 3.50, which is plus 250 for an implied probability of 29%. If you absolutely want to bet this card, I think Sahara Eubanks is one of the better bets on this card. I don't personally recommend betting on Eubanks because I don't think she'll win. I think Aspen Ladd will outwork her, but at the same time, training under Mark Henry for, you know, almost 2 years now actually. So she started training with Mark Henry after she completed The Ultimate Fighter, and the way I look at this is their first fight was relatively competitive. Since August 2017, which is almost 2 years now, Eubanks has been training with Mark Henry, so since then she could have made an enormous amount of improvements, which would mean she'd show up with a new set of skills that she didn't have when she last fought Ladd, and that could mean the fight will play out differently. Now, having said that, Aspen Ladd's only 24 years old, and she's going to be making big improvements as well, so this is why I don't love a bet on Eubanks. I trust Ladd's cardio, work ethic, and overall hustle more than Eubanks, but the odds are generous, and if you are looking to get a dopamine hit, if you're looking for a gambling fix, if you really want to place some bets this weekend, I don't think Sahara Eubanks is a bad bet. But full disclosure, if you are serious about making money, I do not recommend betting Eubanks because there are much stronger positions to put your money in. This is not a strong enough position for me. I don't like it. I am not betting Eubanks. So please, I'm making this as clear as I possibly can. I don't think Eubanks is a good bet. But if you absolutely must place bets this weekend, you could do a lot worse. This is one of the better bets on the card. So I hope that makes sense. So if you do bet Eubanks, if you do bet Eubanks and she loses, please don't cry about it next week. If I thought she was a good bet, a solid bet, I would tell you, but it's risky. That's all I'm going to say. So on to the next fight. We are now going to talk about another heavy favourite, although not one of the bigger favourites, more of a moderate favourite. We've got Patrick Cummins going up against Ed Herman. So these are two super tough aging veterans. Patrick Cummins is 38 years old and Ed Herman is also 38 years old. Both these boys have been around for a very long time, although Patrick Cummins a lot less experienced than Herman, with half the pro MMA fights. But yeah, Herman's been around for forever, and unfortunately, at 38 years old, father time is definitely catching up with these guys. When you watch them in the octagon, they are rigid in their movement, slow reactions, slow reflexes, and they are definitely looking their age. When you see Herman and Cummins fight, they definitely look like two 38-year-olds. Both these guys are very stiff, like I say, very rigid. They don't move their head much, so they've both got very bad striking defense. But what I would say is, even at this stage in his career, Herman has still got a very good chin. Here we can see, aside from a knockout loss to Nikita Krylov and Brunson, there's no shame in getting knocked out by those guys because they both hit very hard. We can see that in Herman, well, since 2013, which is almost 6 years ago, we've only seen Herman knocked out twice in 8 fights, which isn't bad, especially when you consider that he's fought a couple of heavy hitters like Jambalante and gone the distance. Dollaway hits hard, Tim Boach hits hard. Yeah, so his chin's still there at 38 years old. Whereas Patrick Cummins, even though he's very tough, he does tend to get rocked or dropped a lot. But the point I'm trying to make is both these guys have bad striking defense, but Herman's chin is still there. Whereas Cummins, it doesn't take much to really hurt Cummins bad. We can see he's also gone to a lot of decisions, but as you can see, there's no shame in getting knocked out by OSP, Glover, Nogueira. He lost by submission to Serkinov. But what I'm trying to say is he tends to get rocked very easily. I guess what I'm trying to say is Cummins looks much more fragile than Herman. And also with Cummins being primarily a grappler, Herman's boxing is still okay. You know, it's not great, but he still hits hard. And in the context of this fight, his boxing's at a much higher level than Cummins, and he still carries knockout power even at 38 years old. You know, we saw him hurt both Gian Villante and CB Dollaway very badly in his fights. In fact, he almost knocked CB Dollaway out in the first round. So still has that power, still very dangerous. So from a betting perspective, obviously Patrick Cummins is a former Olympic alternate. He is going to want to take this fight to the ground, and with how stiff and rigid and flat-footed Ed Herman stands these days, it isn't going to be difficult to put Herman on the ground. Although with Ed Herman being a veteran, you know, long-time training partner of guys like Tito Ortiz, he's trained at Team Quest for years with guys like Matt Linland and Chael Sonnen. You know, this guy can defend himself on the ground. There's no doubt about it. He's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And even if Cummins does get this fight to the ground, he should be able to defend himself, protect himself. And I think it will be difficult for Cummins to get a finish in this fight, which is what makes this so interesting from a betting perspective. Because there's no doubt that at 38 years old, Father Time is catching up with both guys. But since Cummins came into the UFC, his cardio has been pretty horrendous. Whereas even though at 38 years old, Herman's bound to slow down as the fight progresses, he does tend to be able to catch second wins and weather the storm and just kind of like fight through tiredness a lot more a lot better than Cummins can fight through tiredness. So if we look at the betting odds at the moment, Cummins is around about an average of 1.40, which gives him an implied probability of 71%, which is moneyline odds of minus 250. So to get any value here, you've got to give Cummins a 76% or better chance of winning, which I can't do personally because his striking defense is very bad. He's looking pretty chinny. Herman still hits hard. Herman is also skilled enough to defend himself on the ground, and with Cummins' cardio being so bad, if Herman can just weather the storm, if he does get taken down, just survive till the end of the round, at the beginning of the second round and the third round, there's going to be a window of opportunity to land a KO kill shot on Cummins before he's able to get in on a takedown and try and take this fight to the ground. But by the same token, because Cummins' wrestling's at such a high level, because Herman is so flat-footed now and athletic, it should be easy to take this guy down. And because of that, I've just got no interest in betting him as an underdog. So it's another easy pass for me. It is a shitty card to bet on. It is not smart to bet on 38-year-old fighters, you know, when they are looking like they're 38 years old as well. It's not like they're a Daniel Cormier, 38 years old, still with cardio for days, still looking athletic, still looking sharp and fast. These guys are definitely looking their age, so to bet on either of these guys would be a giant risk. It's not the kind of position I want to put my money into, and that's why I recommend passing. Now, this next fight is one that we do have to pay a little bit more attention to than the rest of the fights on the card, because obviously Mike Trizano versus Grant Dawson is one of the more competitive fights on the card. We've got Mike Trizano at around about 1.77. Yeah, call it average odds are around about 1.77, which is minus 130 for an implied probability of 57%. Fighting Grant Dawson, which is currently the underdog. Odds are around, call it an average of 2.10, which is plus 110 for an implied probability of 48%. So very close to a 50-50 fight, with obviously the bookies slightly favouring Trizano, although Trizano's odds have been gradually improving this week, which is very interesting to me, because Mike Trizano, I'll be dead honest, so out of all the fighters competing on the card this weekend, I've pretty much researched all these fights now. Mike Trizano is the only fighter that I considered betting. And with his odds continuing to improve, I won't rule out the possibility that I may still bet him. So I'm not going to bet him at these odds. But I've seen a lot of people online this week saying that they're going to bet Grant Dawson and they think Dawson is going to win. So we could see a flipping in of the odds here, where Dawson moves to be the favourite, and we could see Mike Trizano's odds move towards underdog territory. And the closer Trizano's odds do get to underdog odds, the more tempted I would be to bet him. So I'm not tempted to bet him as a slight favourite at the moment. Well, I am tempted actually, but I'm not going to. But if his odds were to improve to around 1.91 to 2.0, which would be roughly even money, I would definitely be tempted to take a small bet on Mike Trizano, purely because Trizano is one of your typical Tiger Schulman type fighters. You know exactly what you're getting from him. Very, very technical striker, excellent kickboxer, very difficult to take down and very difficult to hold down. He also does a really good job of scrambling back to his feet when he does get taken down, and despite primarily being a striker, I don't know how Tiger Schulman does it, but all his guys have a really good ground game as well, and Trizano definitely knows how to defend himself on the ground. Now, that's big in this fight because Trizano is an excellent striker, a very technical striker, very different, very similar style to other Tiger Schulman guys like Julio Arce, who's also competing on this card, and Jimmy Rivera, and that makes him potentially a nightmare opponent for Grant Dawson, because Grant Dawson has a very, very low level of striking, very bad striking defense, no power in his hands, and if Mike Trizano can keep this fight standing, I think he'll put on an absolute striking clinic, dominate the fight, and I also think there's a very good chance he will KO Grant Dawson if he can keep the fight standing. So the real question is, will he be able to keep this fight standing? Because we know Grant Dawson is a strong grappler, fights at a very high pace, and he likes to wet blanket people. He will try and relentlessly shoot takedowns and drag Trizano to the ground. So Dawson doesn't fight in kickboxing range. So in order for Trizano to fight at his best and be effective, he wants to fight in the middle of the octagon where he can use his very technical kickboxing to chip away at Dawson. But Dawson doesn't fight in that range. He's either all the way out where he can't be hit, out of the range where Trizano can land strikes on him, or he's all the way in working for takedowns in a range where Trizano can't really hit him. Of course, he can hurt him in the clinch when defending takedowns, but can't obviously fight him in kickboxing range and use his technical striking. So what I would say about Dawson is, the reason why I'm tempted to bet Trizano here is because to the naked eye, Grant Dawson looks like a strong wrestler. And I'm not saying that he's not a strong wrestler, but I kind of am, I guess. The way I need to put this is, so I'm trying not to confuse people, because I know what I'm trying to say in my head, but it's not always easy to get my words out with stuff like this. So in one respect, Grant Dawson is a strong wrestler because he's relentless and he wet blankets people. But on the other hand, he's not a strong wrestler because he doesn't really use the best technique. So guys like Grant Dawson, I tend to call them more blue-collar grapplers, where if we look at the full spectrum of grapplers and wrestlers, so in part 1 of this series of videos, which you should check out if you haven't watched it yet, I'll leave a link to it in the description below, but in part 1 of the video, I described different styles of high-level grapplers. So on one hand, you've got guys like Colby Covington and Kamaru Usman who don't have the best offensive wrestling. If you actually go and watch Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington, they don't actually have the best double leg and single leg takedown entries, but they use razor sharp technique when working for takedowns in the clinch, and they've got the cardio to relentlessly pursue takedowns and chain in the different takedown attempts for as long as the fight goes, and their technique is on point. If you make one mistake, they will drag you to the ground. So while their single leg and double leg takedown entries aren't great, possibly with Usman because his knees are very badly injured, he's got very, very bad recurring knee injuries, so he needs to work for those takedowns in the clinch more because he doesn't have the explosive athletic ability because of the injured knees to shoot in deep on his opponent's hips. So I'm going off on a tangent, but there's that style of wrestler where they just look to turn a fight into a war of attrition and they've got the cardio to back it up. And then the other style of wrestler is a Kevin Lee that doesn't possess the cardio to turn a fight into a war of attrition and grind and work hard for takedowns against the cage, similar to what Khabib does. Khabib doesn't have the best double leg or single leg takedown entry, but he looks to just drive people into the cage and constantly chain into different takedowns until he drags you to the ground. And Kevin Lee's style is different. Kevin Lee has perfected the double leg takedown entry shot, and when he shoots in on his opponent, he gets so tight to their body with his arms connected round their body that they just don't have the space to get double underhooks in play and stuff the takedown. Kevin Lee's double leg takedown entry shot is one of the best in the game. But we're talking about high-level grapplers here, you know, Khabib and Usman and Colby with that one style of chain wrestling from the clinch that's very effective, and then Kevin Lee's style of razor-sharp technique and double-leg takedown entries on the other end of the spectrum. But unfortunately, Grant Dawson lies somewhere in the middle where he tries to be both things, but he's kind of a jack of all trades and a master of none. He is neither good at either style of grappling, and for that reason he's kind of in the middle and doesn't really have very good technique in terms of the wet blanket style or the sharp technical takedown entries. And for that reason, you can turn this guy into a panic wrestler, because to the naked eye he looks like a strong wrestler, but as soon as this type of fighter goes up against someone with legit takedown defense, they will get exposed badly. And the reason being, I like to call them, like I say, blue collar grapplers, basically, because they don't have the right technique, they don't have the right tools, and they try and make up for that with work ethic and work rate and hustle. A little bit similar to what Aspen Ladd does, except the distinction here is Aspen Ladd has the cardio to hustle for 3 rounds, whereas Grant Dawson, based on past performances, doesn't. If you go back and watch his last fight against Julian Erosa, you can see that he slowed down quite bad in the second round, and also this fight is also available on UFC Fight Pass against Christian Camp. You can see he slowed down quite badly here as well. But I'm going to get into that in a little bit more detail in a minute, rather than going off on another tangent, because I don't think that's a deal breaker, which is the reason why I haven't bet on Trizano yet. So what I would say about Dawson is he doesn't have the correct technique. He doesn't have the razor-sharp NCAA technique of Colby and Usman to drive people into the cage and constantly chain takedowns together and make them pay for any little mistake they make. And he definitely doesn't have the sharp takedown entries that Kevin Lee does. You know, when Dawson shoots, is very predictable. Very telegraphed, and one of the reasons why he's so predictable is because his striking is at such a low level that he just can't set his takedowns up. You see him coming from a mile away. This guy is such an easy guy to game plan, because Trizano will not even have to think about striking in this fight. All he'll have to focus on is watching Dawson's hips, watching his feet, and just getting ready for the takedown shot. Dawson cannot set the takedown up with his strikes, which makes him very predictable. And when he does shoot in, not really that explosive. I mean, it's just kind of predictable. His single leg and takedown entries aren't the best, guys. And because of that, you often see him having to try and complete his takedowns against the cage. So because his entries aren't the best, he's quite predictable. He often has to drive through on those takedown shots, push his opponent up against the cage and try and work for takedowns, you know, Colby, Usman, Khabib style. But he just doesn't have the technique to do it. He gives his opponents a lot of space to get underhooks in play, and for whatever reason, he's just not particularly good at getting control of his opponent's body, which means because he doesn't have the best technique and he's not the fastest at getting control of his opponent's body with body locks and underhooks, he burns a lot of energy, commits a lot of energy to trying to get takedowns without necessarily achieving a lot. Now, this hasn't hurt him too bad up until this point of his career, because guys like blue-collar guys like Dawson, without the correct technique, can get away with it against lower level guys and rack up wins on the regional circuit, where guys on the regional circuit don't really have the technique to see your telegraph takedowns come in, and they don't really have the awareness to get those underhooks in play early and shut down your offensive wrestling, which is pretty sloppy for Dawson. Whereas when you start to face a higher level of opponent, you know, guys like Mike Trizano that train under Tiger Schulman, a gym famous for producing fighters that are excellent at getting double underhooks in play, your job becomes very difficult, and guys like Grant Dawson can start to get found out. Now, everything I've just said does have an asterisk next to it, because remember, when it comes to what I would say is, if you are flipping burgers in Burger King, right? There's nothing wrong with that, man. I worked in a supermarket for like 6 years. You know, when I left school when I was 18, I was literally in a supermarket for like 6 years. I worked in a bakery making bread. This is not a criticism at all of anyone that does a job like that. But when we're talking about making money in different aspects of life, I think there's different mindsets that will crush it and other mindsets that won't. So if your brain works in a way where you have to work in black and white and absolutes and right and wrongs, then I think it is very difficult for you to make money in this game. In order to make money in this game, you have to be very open-minded, open to all possibilities. It's like if you're flipping burgers in Burger King, there is a set process on how to make a burger. There is one way of doing things, and if you deviate from that process, the burger is not going to end up how it's supposed to end up. You know, there's a very one-track mind, a very, very, very basic mindset that a lot of people have, where they only want to see things one way. You know, if you pick Mike Trizano to win this weekend and he loses, you are wrong. And if you pick Mike Trizano to win this weekend and he wins, you are right. I think that mindset is a bad mindset. It's a very one-track mindset. It's not a mindset geared towards being dynamic and making good decisions and being very rational and open-minded about things. With a fight like this, it is very important that you hold the other type of mindset, because everything that I've just said is true. It is absolutely true. Everything I've said is true. Based on the footage I've watched, no one can dispute what I have said. It is just the truth, okay? But then we have to open our minds to possibilities that what we may see on Saturday night may not reflect what we have seen in the past. Because Grant Dawson's only 25 years old. He trains at a good gym surrounded by great grapplers at Glory MMA. At 25 years old, he's going to be learning and making huge improvements from fight to fight. So, when we look at his career, he hasn't really fought that much at all. You know, since 2016... he had a fight on the Contender Series. He wouldn't have got paid shit for that. He wouldn't have got paid nothing. Probably $5,000-$10,000 max. But then, 2 months ago, against Julian Erosa, he fought in the UFC and won. So fighters that come into the UFC tend to have a $10,000 show money. So they show up and fight, they get paid 10 grand. And if they win, they get a win bonus on top of that. Which is basically the equivalent to their show money. So $10,000 to show up and another $10,000 if you win. So 2 months ago, Grant Dawson probably made 20 grand for this fight. And he's a young guy, you know, I don't know anything about him, but 25 years old, probably hasn't got that many commitments. So 20 grand for a 25-year-old's probably a lot of money 2 months ago. Now, Dawson, because he's got an inefficient style of fighting, he doesn't use the correct technique, that causes him to slow down as fights progress. We saw it happen against Christian Camp, and we saw it happen against Julian Erosa. But that might also be because this kid hasn't earned any money, and he's trying to be a professional fighter and a professional athlete. And obviously, when you're not earning money, it's difficult to eat good. We all know how expensive it is to buy healthy food. You know, I don't know about different countries, but at least in the UK, you know, a decent cut, a decent, you know, organic salmon fillet, that'll cost £4 or £5, which is about $6 or $7. You know, a nice grass-fed steak, a nice grass-fed organic piece of steak, a nice fillet or a sirloin, that's going to run you £10, £11, which is $13, $14, you know, in supermarkets or shopping malls. Not quite sure what you call them, but like stores like Whole Foods, I think you guys have them in America. You know, this is expensive. You know, vegetables are expensive for a young guy just 25 years old, probably only making a few $100s per fight for these fights on the regional circuit in Kansas City Fight Alliance. No more than $1,000 or $2,000. You know, nowhere even near minimum wage. So this guy's probably had to work jobs to support himself. Probably hasn't been eating that good, might be living a diet of fast food and hard work and hustle, because that's all he can afford to do. And he might not even be able to train full time, because if he's trying to hold down jobs, obviously he can't spend as much time in the gym. So what I would say is, based on past performances, this is a very good stylistic matchup for Trizano, because he has the technique to keep this fight standing, he has the technique to turn Grant Dawson into a panic wrestler, and he has the technique to totally dominate this fight standing and probably knock Dawson out by making him pay for his bad striking defense. However, you can tell when you watch Dawson fight that he is a tough mamma jammer. Very, very tough. He works very hard. He is the opposite of what we spoke about in part 2 of this video. So when I was breaking down the Trevin Giles versus Zach Cummins fight in part 2 of this series of videos, check it out. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. We were saying that Zach Cummins is a frustrating guy because even though he is a good grappler, strong grappler, black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, trained with Tyron Woodley for a long time, he's got decent offensive wrestling, he's frustrating because he'll go a whole 5-minute round without shooting a takedown when he's getting outstruck. Very frustrating. Whereas Grant Dawson, he's like Ron Seal, does exactly what he says on the tin. And if you live outside the UK, that might not make much sense to you. But what I'm trying to say is, this geezer is just a fucking workhorse. And I like him. I like him for that. He's just a beast. He might not show up and win. He might show up and get knocked the fuck out. He might show up, adrenaline dump, shooting inefficient takedowns for 5-6 minutes, turned into a panic wrestler and KO'd. Might happen, but fuck me, if you bet on this kid, he's going to show up and fight for your money. A lot more that can be said than Jose Aldo last week. Last week, we knew if Jose Aldo showed up and performed to his full potential, he would dominate. But we couldn't go big on him because we know he's a giant flake box. There was a chance he was going to underperform. This kid, Grant Dawson, will fight for your money. If he loses, it's because he went out on his sword. Like that broad out of Game of Thrones, the big knight, I can't remember her name, the huge knight with the blonde hair. Just, you can trust her. And I'm only on season 6, so maybe she turns later on and gets some corruption or whatever. I'm like binge watching Game of Thrones right now. But that night, she fucking goes after Stannis. She wants to like punch the fucking Red Witch right in the vag. At the end of the day, you can trust people like that to just fucking go for it and do the right thing. They're dependable, and Grant Dawson is as dependable as it comes. So the way I look at this fight is, based on past performances, I think this is a tough fight for Dawson because I think that his inefficient style of fighting, his lack of technique, and therefore his lack of technique leading to him slowing down, because when you don't use the correct technique, you exert more energy and slow down faster. I think that's going to get him into trouble against Trizano, and I think Trizano is going to win. However, he did make 20 grand 2 months ago against Julian Erosa. So if that means he's been able to eat good and train full time for the first time in his career, and if for the first time he shows up with cardio to fight at the high pace that he likes to fight at for 15 minutes, I think this kid is a goddamn nightmare, and I think it'll be a very, very tough fight for Mike Trizano if that happens. So if Grant Dawson has been eating good cuts of organic chicken, nice juicy grass-fed decent cuts of steak, and smashing that organic fillet with loads of vegetables over the last 2 months, and training hard with some of the best fighters in the world of glory, MMA and fitness, then he can definitely win. But if he shows up looking like he did against Julian Erosa and Christian Camp, I think he's going to struggle bad. So that is why this fight is a very tricky one for betting for me, and why there is no right or wrong in this game. No matter who you bet this weekend, you are not right or wrong. If you pick Mike Trizano to win and he loses, you weren't wrong. That's just how the universe unfolded on Saturday night. That is just how the universe unfolded, and it probably meant Dawson showed up with better cardio than he usually has. If you bet Dawson this weekend, I don't think it's a very good bet, only because, and hear me out, only because I like to bet on things we know and things that we've seen happen. What I've said about him showing up with better cardio because of improved diet and training is an assumption. You know, at the end of the day, he could have spent his 20 grand on hookers and cocaine. It's equally as likely. I doubt he did, because he seems like a smart, intelligent fighter, a young, hungry bull that is motivated and wanting to do well in his career. So I doubt he spent it on hookers and cocaine. But you never know. It's an assumption to assume he's showing up a better cardio. That's why I don't think Dawson is a good bet, because until we see him improve his cardio and efficiency, I can't pull the trigger. That's why I prefer Trizano in this fight. But at the current odds, I am giving Dawson respect. I am anticipating he'll look much better than he did in his UFC debut against De Rosa, and that's the reason why I need better odds than 1.77 to pull the trigger on Trizano. But if he gets close to even money, I'll do it. And again, guys, full disclosure, that doesn't mean I'm betting Mike Trizano. That doesn't mean I'm recommending that you bet Mike Trizano. All I'm saying is keep an eye on the odds. If they get close to even money, he's worth a small bet. I hope that makes sense. Don't know how much more clearer I can be. And again, I know that these videos have been boring this week because there's been no betting opportunities, but I'll keep digging and hopefully I'll find something. And one more thing I want to say, guys. If you want to make money in this game, I literally... Let me give you some ASMR. I gotta go to ASMR for this. I don't give a fuck about picking fights correctly. Did you hear that, motherfuckers? I don't give a fuck about picking fights correctly. In case you didn't quite get that, I don't give a flying fuck about picking fights correctly. My YouTube channel is not Diary of a Guy that has a set... let me start again. My YouTube channel is not called Diary of a Guy that picks 70% of fights correctly on Tapology. That is not my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is called Diary of a Pro Gambler. The only thing I care about is making money. I do not give a fuck about accurate picks. Just don't give a flying fuck about them. They're just not interested because I'm open-minded enough to know that there are fights that you cannot pick a winner in. You cannot predict the outcome of. You know, Dawson and Trizano are going to show up on Saturday night and they're going to fight to the death until the referee steps in and stops one of them. And there ain't no fucking way to know who's going to win that. So picks are silly to me. Okay? I only care about making money. Bets are what counts. You really need to get that. And it's really important to develop the kind of mindset where you are open-minded. I always recommend this book, guys, and I'm talking about this now because you've been hanging around for this long. It means you are of the mindset that you want to make money, and I want to produce this good content for you guys to help you make money. If you have read this book, which is one of the greatest books I've ever read, and if you want to learn how to make money gambling, buy this goddamn book. I will leave a link to it in the description below. It is called Principles of Life and Work by Ray Dalio, who is one of the most successful investors of all time. And he's in his 80s now. And when a billionaire writes a book, you should take fucking notice, because a book is a terrible way to make money. There is no incentive in writing a book when you're a billionaire and you're 80 years old. It's an absolute pain in the ass. It's a long process, difficult to make money from, and it's just a giant pain in the ass, basically. But Ray Dalio had all this knowledge that he accrued over a lifetime of investing and doing business, and he wanted to pass it on to his children and his grandchildren. But he couldn't pass it all on because he had so much that he wanted to say and so much he wanted to share. So instead of overloading them in conversations, he thought instead he will write a book. So he's put his entire life's wisdom into a book that you can buy and read for 15 fucking pounds. It's a deal. It's a steal. It's sale of the fucking century. If you buy one thing for the rest of the year, you should buy this book because it is brilliant. You get a billionaire investor's entire life's wisdom in a book for you to learn from. And if you want to learn how to make money from gambling, read this fucking book, because within this book he talks about a concept over and over and over again. It's called Principles, and one of the key principles in this book is something he talks about over and over and over and over again, which is called radical open-mindedness. In order to be successful in this life, you have to be radically open-minded, and that is why the words right and wrong are foolish and stupid. There is no right or wrong. There is only different scenarios that can unfold, and by being radically open-minded, you stand a much greater chance of crushing it in life, because being radically open-minded will enable you to identify all possible scenarios, be able to identify probabilities to each scenario, and then make better decisions, not only in betting but also in investing, in life, in relationship decisions. You know, if you're on Tinder and you are, look, I've been married for 10 fucking years. I don't know how Tinder works, but I assume you swipe. I've seen how it works. I don't know what the swipe left swipe right and the swipe left means. If left you want to bang them and right you think they're a munter. I don't know the difference, so just bear with me on this analogy. But all I'm saying is, if you've got 10 broads that you want to bang, okay, and there's one of them you really like, yeah? You really like her, but you know if that girl finds out that you are sliding into the DMs of these other 8 or 9 girls, you might really fuck up your chances of getting with that girl and having a good proper long-term relationship with her. You see what I'm saying? But there's a good chance you'll be able to bang another 3 or 4 girls on Tinder, which is, you know, it's pretty good. They're all hot, just there's this one girl you really like. So you have to assign probabilities, do you know what I mean? There's no right or wrong decision. Do you go out and chase all 4 or 5 girls, go after that tail, risk gambling the fact this girl you really like will never find out? Or do you just risk giving up on that tail, going after this one girl, getting rejected, and then also losing out on the opportunity to bang the other 4 girls? These are all things. It's radical open-mindedness. There's no right or wrong decision. There's loads of different ways that the universe can unfold, and you have to understand these concepts to crush it in life, in relationships, in finances, in investments, in betting, in fucking car purchasing decisions. Just weigh up all options on the table, assign probabilities, and then go after the best one based on the probability that you feel is more likely, that you feel has a better risk to reward ratio. And I don't know what else to say on the topic, guys, but that is why fights like Trizano and Dawson are tough to bet on. Fights like Spencer versus Megan Anderson are tough to bet on, and fights like Rafael dos Anjos versus Kevin Lee are tough to bet on, because even when you do tons of research, like the Jose Aldo versus Alexander Volkanovski fight, even when you identify that one guy, if everything goes well and both guys show up and perform to their full potential, you identify that one guy should dominate, you have to be radically open-minded enough to know that at any point in time, life can punch you right in the dick. So go buy that book, guys. Again, I am sorry that I haven't got any bets for you so far for this week. I will keep digging, but you just have to accept that tight is right. Sometimes you gotta know when to hold them and know when to fold them, and there's no point putting good money in a lot of danger betting on marginal situations which just aren't smart. So I love money. I don't really care about being the smartest guy at the barbecue. I don't really care about picks, and I don't care about giving you guys bets just for the sake of it. All I care about is driving nice cars, living in a nice house, travelling to nice places, and living a comfortable, happy, stress-free life. So in order to achieve all of those things, you need to put your money in strong positions and not place bad bets. And that is why this channel is called Diary of a Professional Gambler, not Diary of a Total Fucking Moron. And on that note, guys, hit the like button below if you appreciate this video and you want me to keep pumping these videos out. If this video gets 250 likes, I will do the live stream on Friday night where I find a decent value prop bet for every single one of these fights. And I will also be answering all your questions in the live chat Q&A. And also, I really want to get to 1,400 subs by this weekend. So if you could, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. That would mean a lot. And also, if you could share this on your social media profiles and also on any forums you post on, that would also mean a lot. But take care, guys. Hope you enjoyed today's video, and I'll be back tomorrow with part 4.
Too many thoughts on my mind, I can't sleep at night, so I just keep writing. I don't need no help, I don't need opinions, so don't waste my time then. I just been living online, my city don't show me no love, and that's fine. Fuck local radio stations, I got more plays than all of these rappers combined. I'm going again, I've been going in, I'm fed up with so many things, I gotta just let it all out. I'm talking about the shit they've been talking